All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Although,
Happy
what is time anymore? Every day is just like the one before it. Everybody's nodding. It is my privilege to be here today with two really fascinating, interesting women who I've had the tremendous privilege of knowing both personally and professionally. Before I introduce them, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Holly Amaya, and together with Anne-Marie Hoftailing, I run a company called Story Imprinting, and we teach companies the art and science of storytelling. So we do a lot of live training, which of course is now sort of all been relegated to Zoom and virtual training. And we do public relations and communications as well. So in-person story mining, message development, media relations, all that good stuff. You can check us out on www.storyimprinting.com and on social media. But enough about me. So I'm here today with Megan Moore, who is an attorney that works in the school and education space. She's also an executive coach. She is a wonderful person. I know that she is a wonderful coach because she has coached me through personal and professional issues before, and I'm really grateful for that. And also Cheryl Nolan, who is an animal law attorney who has a fascinating backstory about how she got into doing what she does. And she's one of the few animal law attorneys in the country, and she's right here in San Diego. We are doing these discussions every Friday. Anne-Marie and I kind of just decided, you know, it's great to do webinars, and we're all doing a lot of webinars, but the thing that I miss really desperately since we've all been sheltering in place during coronavirus is just getting together with my friends and talking to them and hearing, you know, what's going on with them. And I think, you know, I've really tried to remind myself there's a lot of opportunity to be had, even though things feel very desperate, and I'm not diminishing that at all because, you know, it's an ebb and a flow, but I'm looking for the opportunities in the situation that we've all found ourselves in. And one of the ways we're just trying to be, to stand up and be here for the business community is by hosting these weekly chats with really interesting people talking about a variety of topics. So last week we talked about leadership. This week we're talking about reinvention, which I love. And next week we're going to be talking about financial focus. We've got a wealth advisor and a tax professional who will be on talking about all things finance. And we are open to hearing from y'all about what you want us to talk about. And if you want to come on and do one of these with me, please. This is like the best part of my Friday. So with that said, before I dive in with questions for you ladies, participants, feel free to get into the chat box, send a Q&A. Like, we want this to be a really didactic experience where you feel like you're getting something out of it, and you can ask questions that relate to your own potential reinvention or whatever. And so feel free to do that. Don't be shy about it. We will not go more than an hour. I want to be very mindful of everyone's time, because at 2:30, I mean, again, what is time? You might pour yourself a glass of champagne. Like, I don't know. There's no judgment. It's fine. It's 5 o'clock. Meg is into it. Okay, so ladies, I would like for you each to spend just a couple of minutes talking to our audience about yourself. So just, who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? And go.
Megan, you can go first. If you
great. Okay.
Unless you want me to go first.
I'll take it. I can go first. And I will also say, hopefully my internet does not peter out on me whilst we are chatting, but I think I'll be okay. Knock on.
We've all been there. We'll just keep talking. And then
right. So, and hopefully if I freeze.
Last week I got kicked off 4 times.
Hopefully if I freeze like this and not like that. So anyway, thank you first, Holly, and to Anne-Marie and Story Imprinting for hosting these sessions and having a bit of discussion rather than just people presenting. It's really an honor to be able to present here or talk here with, and especially with Cheryl, because she and I kind of were reinventing ourselves at the same time with our businesses. So my name is Megan Myra Moore. As Holly said, I am an attorney and an executive coach. My area of legal practice is with K-12 public schools, and my focus is related to students within those schools. I do a lot of help with special education, working with a lot of my charter schools and my school districts right now on just getting our poor kids educated in this strange and bizarre time. I am also a coach, and I'll talk more about coaching and the benefit of that, both individual and group coaching, and how that served me, and how I really honed reinvention. And relevant to today is that idea of the professional reinvention. And I came to know Holly and Cheryl at a time when I was beginning my, I was just about to launch a solo career. I was in my 10th year of legal practice and launched the law offices of Megan Moore. And that first year in 2019 was a great year for me. I worked very hard and utilized a lot of what I had learned to kind of reinvent from being at a firm to solo. And in that time period, I learned a lot about myself, and my reinvention wasn't so much opening the law practice, but realizing that I am a risk taker and a business maven, and I can kick ass at a lot of different ways in the business and legal community. And so I just am amped up to talk about what reinvention is and what that means today here. So thank you.
Yes, and I
love that. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to say that the element of risk, I think, is huge. And so I want to go back to that with both of you later. You know, I also never really thought of myself as a risk taker. And then I started a business right before a pandemic hit. So like, there's that, you know, I never would have thought that I would have done that. And so I think often like these stories we tell ourselves can be very difficult to overcome. So I want to know more about kind of how both of you navigated that. But Cheryl, introduce yourself. You're looking lovely today, my dear.
Thank you. So
You're welcome.
maybe it's the extra sleep I'm getting or the different hours, I'm not sure. So my name is Cheryl Nolan, and I am an animal law attorney. And I'm also very thankful to Holly and Anne-Marie and Story and Printing for giving us this opportunity to have this discussion and hear from others. I have been talking about my transition into animal law for a while now, and Holly and Meg know that actually I was preparing for this day. It gave me a chance to kind of go through my journaling and my personal notes. And it's ironic or not, I don't know. I found that I actually began talking with you guys about just where I fit in the world literally like 2 years ago. And, you know, I'm always interested in my timelines. They mean something to me. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this also gave me a chance to look back on how I reinvented. What were the steps I went through? What did it take? And I think that, you know, in contrast to Meg, I was not being a risk taker when I made this transition, although I was put in a series of circumstances, much like what we're experiencing now. Some of it was by choice, some of it was unanticipated. But really the impetus for making the leap into, you know, doing exclusive animal law and nothing else was really my support circle and the women that were listening to me talk through different ideas. They reflected back to me what they saw. You know, literally, we see your face light up when you talk about dogs or animal law, but you don't seem to be as thrilled when you speak about other areas of practice. And had I not received that feedback, I think I would have continued along the path that I was on before. So I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's, I think it's a good contrast for this discussion to hear what Meg says about her very real risk-taking and her exciting path and how it contrasts to mine.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I've shared this with both of you, but for those of you who are watching who don't know me, I also am a lawyer. I just can't get enough of lawyers. They're my people. These two lawyers, I'm married to a lawyer who's upstairs. But I, for a long time, when I transitioned into going into PR, you know, I was still like doing legal work too, because I felt like I should, or I needed to, or it was comfortable. And I realized that that was just robbing me of a lot of mental real estate that I could otherwise dedicate to this thing that I really love doing, which I know, you know, we've all talked about that. The three of us have talked about that. And so, you know, Cheryl, what you're saying about really digging in and focusing on the animal law piece, that's really huge. I mean, I've worked with a lot of lawyers and they'll say like, well, I do this, I do that, and I do that, and I do these things because like they're safe and they generate revenue and this and that, but I kind of hate it. Like it's kind of soul sucking. I really love this thing, you know, and making that affirmative choice to segue into into what you really love doing, I mean, it is a risk. It's a huge risk, you know. So I would reframe that, because I think like you went all in, and I know we'll talk about this on the animal law stuff. I definitely saw a change in you, but that in itself is a risk, right? So that leads me to my second question. You know, when I came to you and said, come talk about reinvention with a group of potential strangers on the internet, like, why did you say, yes, that is something that I want to do on a Friday? Why is this important? Why is this an important topic for you to talk about? Cheryl, you want to start?
Sure. I was excited about the opportunity to talk about it because I have been having these smaller conversations with people in my circle, other attorneys. I find that I'm asked always, the first two questions that people ask me when they find out that I practice animal law is, one, is that really a thing? If it's an attorney, they'll say, that can't possibly be a thing. And then the next question they'll ask is, you know, where do you get your clients? Who is your client? Is your client the dog or the horse? And so in those conversations, I talk about how I got into it, and then I get into my backstory. And I think that in this time right now that we're in, this is such an incredible opportunity for everybody to reflect back on what they have in their own world that they may not even be aware of, and that they can draw upon and really leverage right now. I have never been so jazzed about what I'm doing, and I've never been so engaged as I have been since I decided to streamline and don't do what's safe and do the thing that, you know, all of the attorneys that were ready to retire were saying to me, you can't possibly do animal law. There is no business in that field of law. You just should do estate planning or do family law, do bankruptcy, do what will bring in revenue. And just trying to explain to them that I knew it was a real thing. I know other attorneys are doing it in other jurisdictions and have been for many years. And I just thought, if they're doing it, why can't I? And many of these other attorneys are highly successful and don't bring the same skills or experience to the table that I bring. So.
Yeah, and Meg, before we move to you, I think this would be a good opportunity, Cheryl. Can you kind of share with everyone who's here your background with animals and why this is something that has really spoken to you? Because that's a huge part of your story and it's fascinating.
Yeah, and you notice how I like naturally glided past that. So that I still have a tendency to do that.
I'm not going to let you do it.
I was wondering myself. I'm like, when's she going to tell the story? Come on, Cheryl.
Yeah, so here's another thing that I realized recently is that, you know, ever since I was very young, starting in elementary school, I had begun learning Spanish in an immersion program and became bilingual Spanish from a very young age. And I took that with me through my high school and college years in the image that I believed that this was a skill that I needed to use to help people. And that was kind of how my vision of what I should be of an attorney was based on. And I carried that through in law school and through my first and second and third jobs. I always said, you know, I want to be in San Diego. I want to use my Spanish. And yet, also happening since the age of 5 and 6 was this grand literally 24/7 exposure to the dog world. And through my mother, who also was a huge risk taker, and she decided to become a dog obedience instructor and do her own group classes. And like literally the phone would never stop ringing. This was before the days of when we had online marketing. It was completely word of mouth. She had cute little business cards and she would hand them out to everywhere. And she gave free advice constantly. And, you know, it was amazing. Like, she was lit and the people were always calling. And, you know, some of the interesting facts about her, she never forgot somebody's first name and the name of their dog, but she'd never remember your last name. People loved her. Growing up in that environment, I then became, I got involved in the dog show world. And so I started showing dogs at 6 and was showing dogs all the way up through high school. And I guess my mother would have been the equivalent of a stage mom in the dog world. Everything tied back into dogs. We learned about the birds and the bees through big diagrams of how puppies are born and how puppies are made. And my mother would go to schools and give presentations to classes of young kids and drag me along and tag me along to help teach people how to care for their dogs. You know, how much exercise should you give? How do you wash a dog? because it was so infused in my day-to-day life, like literally, I can't think of a single day where it didn't come up. I, in a sense, wasn't excited about it, and I wanted to do something different. And I recently found an old California lawyer magazine that I had been carrying around with me ever since I started law school in '91, so it probably was a 1989 or 1985 issue. Some California attorney said she did dog law, and I just thought it was kind of cute and carried that thing around with me forever. I mean, I still have it. And
I love that.
Right? And yet I never once put it together that I wanted to do that. I always pushed the dog stuff away. And as a teenager, I was somewhat embarrassed of my mom being the dog mom. Although people would say, we're so jealous that Ginger's your mom. How cool is that? So that's my background. And, you know, going back to what I said about learning Spanish, what I know now is that I am fluent in the dog world and by extension, fluent in the animal world. And there's not a single example of a life problem or a legal problem involving an animal that I have not personally experienced. Literally, I have yet to have something come to me that I don't have something to draw upon. And what I really love—
That's amazing.
Right? What I've been also noticing is when I talk to new calls, and I get a lot of volume, surprisingly. I think those close to retirement attorneys would be shocked of the number of people that are calling me. They frequently say, oh my God, I'm so glad I found you. I've talked to so many attorneys that just do dog bites. And is this really a thing? And I'm so grateful. And then at the end of the call, which is really usually about 15 minutes or less before they decide they want to meet with me, they'll say, I feel so much better now that I've talked to you. You've really brought a peace of mind, and I feel like we're on the right track. And that excites me so much. It really makes me feel like I'm using a skill and a fluency to help people.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that background story. Meg, for you, like, why did you say yes when I was like, come talk about reinvention? Why were you so jazzed to join us?
I'm laughing because I saw the ask and saw it, and I saw the word reinvention, and I didn't even hesitate. Like, I wasn't even like, oh, what could I talk about? I was like, reinvention, that's me. And I think it spoke to me for a variety of reasons. And you know, we were kind of, when we were preparing for this and thinking about like, is reinvention an overhaul or is it a shift? And I think I definitely think it can be anywhere, all of those things and anywhere in between. For me, I'm someone, for those people who know me, except for maybe the two of you, I think I've had brown hair since you've known me. I go from blonde to brown every couple of years. I've been a redhead. I loved it. Like, I get bangs, I grow my bangs out. So there's like a little part of me, and I think it comes from the drama school kid in me that likes to reinvent and change things up, right? I like to play a little bit. But when I thought about it from a, you know, that's kind of on the personal side of things, but professionally, I just feel like my kind of, like I said, my reinvention, it was in part realizing I could open my own law practice. And it's so interesting listening to Cheryl, because when I first began to know the two of you, I was already on the path to opening the practice and was kind of in some of the nuts and bolts parts of it, of like, talk to an ethics attorney and make sure you follow all the procedures and dot your I's and cross your T's and all of that.
Right.
But so in that year, in 2018, if you had asked me in April 2018 what I was going to do next, there is no way at all I would have said open my own law practice. That is what, it wasn't even on my radar. And so, and this is where I keep emphasizing coaching, because I had an individual coach, professional coach that I worked with, and then I belonged to Infinite and worked within a group coaching setting as well. And I can't say enough how much those processes or those supports help you. I mean, Cheryl spoke to it too. Like, it's not until oftentimes not until someone's looking at you and talking to you and saying things like, God, your face really lights up when you talk about animals, that sometimes it takes somebody holding up that mirror to you to realize I might be able to do this thing. And so for me, when I was thinking about, am I happy in the firm life or not? And, you know, for those attorneys that are listening, I think we all who work in firms all have the back and forth of like, is this what I want or not? And I got a lot of satisfaction and grew a lot out of working in a firm. And so I don't think that one needs to not be at a firm to reinvent oneself. So that's not where I'm going with this. But for me, I initially thought, I think I might stop practicing law. And then what came for me out of the coaching that I was getting was like, what I want is a life where I can have more flexibility with my time and make kind of the same amount of money. And it dawned on me, and sometimes I feel like when we look back, like Cheryl was saying, like, well, duh, I've been carrying around a magazine about dog lawyers since I was 23 years old, and I never crossed my mind until 20 years later. Like, that's crazy. But like for me, that idea of like, you know, if I'm paying myself, I'm making more money, or I can make the same amount of money. And so I noticed that it, I'm sorry, I got slightly distracted because I wasn't sure where the camera was going.
Sorry. Gotta love Zoom. You're like, where do I look? Camera one, camera two.
Right, camera one.
I look at the different boxes.
So funny. So it was through this process of someone holding up a mirror that I was like, I think I could open my own firm. I think where my reinvention, I mean, certainly leaving a firm and opening a solo practice is a huge change and one I'm very proud of. But it was during that year of my first year of that solo practice that I was like, I've always labeled myself, or at least since I heard someone say it when I was in law school, I heard this thing about lawyers being risk averse. And I'm like, yes, that is me, I'm risk averse. And then suddenly through exploring kind of my business making decisions, I just swear like my eyes opened up. And when I say it now, again, it's like, duh. And I'm like, risk averse. We moved a ton when I was a kid. I lived in 4 states before I was 5 years old. My family went bankrupt. I was the only child of my 5 sisters left at home when that happened. We had to move and live with grandma in the middle of ninth grade. I picked up the violin and started playing in the 4th grade. I don't know why, no one in my family played. I joined the swim team when I was 14 years old and literally had never had a swim lesson before. So this idea of risk.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's what suddenly became this reinvention story for me. I was like, I just saw myself in such a different light. And that's what's also led me now to be open to coaching myself and providing coaching to other people in a way that I didn't imagine before.
And I think that story though, someone telling you in law school that like lawyers are risk averse and like you pull them onto that. I mean, I want everybody who's here, seriously, think about like all of those things that you're telling yourself about yourself and about who you think you are, and where is that actually true? I mean, we say this all the time in conversations, the 3 of us, and then with the executive group that we're all part of. You know, we'll say, is that true? Is that really true? And I see some names on the participant list who are part of that group, and I know you all are nodding. But I mean, it's hard to challenge these beliefs about ourselves. And I think that kind of taps into I'm sure there are people on this who are watching this either now or who will watch it later who will say, that's really great, but like, I'm afraid to reinvent myself. I mean, fear plays a role, particularly, I think, when you get to a point, you know, with a profession, let's say, you know, you're a lawyer just because you both are. And I know we have a lot of lawyers on, you know, it's easy. You get to a certain point in your career and you're like, well, I'm making really good money. I know how to do this job. Why would I get off this train, right? Like I'm not a risk taker, or I'm not an entrepreneur, or I'm not a whatever. And, you know, there's this quote that I will mess it up, but it's, you know, something to the effect of, what are you going to do with your one wild precious life, or something like that. Look it up. I've screwed it up, but it's like that. And it's, you know, as I get older and I have kids, and so now time is marching like really fast because I measure it by those years, right? And as they grow, I think, yeah, like life is way too short to be stuck in a situation, or to be in a situation that you're not enjoying, you know? And so the process of reinvention can be a long one, and that's fine. I'm not at all suggesting that like everybody just quit their job and go do whatever. I mean, but so talk to me a little bit about the fear. Like, was fear any part of your professional reinvention, and how did you get around that? And also just talk to us a little bit about the process, you know, like how long from the time that you realized you wanted to make a change to actually making that change, how long was that? What did you do? Two questions in one, a twofer.
A twofer. I think it's funny it's so easy, especially in our professional world, to believe that the person we admire or that we would like to be like is not afraid. And that is bullshit. Everyone is afraid, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone, right? Everyone messes up. I find it fascinating, especially through the group and individual coaching, how many of my clients and how many of my colleagues say things like, well, I'm too lazy to reinvent myself. I call myself lazy all the time. And that is fear, right? That's really just fear poking its head up.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah. And so I think with fear, I would encourage anyone who's thinking about making a change. Listen, I grew up in a household where my mother, and Cheryl and I both have strong mother stories. And so I think I can go through without getting choked up. But my mom, God love her, I grew up in the household where the phrase, don't get your hopes up. Don't get your hopes up in a meaning of like pure protection and love of like, I don't want you to be injured, my child. That's how I was raised. And when you're making a change, I say to you, get your damn hopes up. It doesn't hurt any less just because you were thinking you couldn't do it. And in fact, you're never going to do it if you don't think you can. So I just think when you're feeling afraid, don't tell yourself you shouldn't feel afraid. Of course you're going to feel afraid. It would be baloney for me to say I wasn't afraid to launch a solo practice. Like, I was completely afraid. And so I think embrace that fear and get your hopes up and get support. Get someone who can help you, hold you up to that possibility. Because I think for most of us, our internal voice is regularly saying, that's not going to work. I don't know if you should do that. Don't get your hopes up. Don't get your hopes up. And if you can work with others who hold you up and all they do is see that possibility in you, that is how you overcome the fear. And in my professional, I already said this and I'll hand it back over to Cheryl. For me, it was so strong for me to start individual coaching and really start looking at, I had a lot of the same beliefs that I hear attorney. I'm too busy. There's never enough time. I can't do it. What if I don't make money? All of these time and money, right? That they're always there. And really those are hows and not whys. And so I, in terms of process, the one thing I would say to you is if you're feeling in a rut or you're feeling like I want to pivot, and maybe it's not reinvention. Maybe it's go to a different law firm. Maybe it's it's something as big as I want to run for public office, or something different of I'm at this veterinarian's office right now and I want to go to a different one. Like, it could be any of those things. And I just encourage you to get support and work with someone who will not only help you hold yourself accountable and hold up that mirror, but also will just hold you in all of the possibility, because that to me is the way that's how I overcame my fears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that. Yeah. Cheryl, how about you?
For myself, I think for me, what you two saw is that I had a lot of fits and starts with animal law, and I would, start the foray into investigating what I needed to do, connecting with other attorneys, finding some mentors, getting some education. And then I would see an opportunity somewhere in left field that was more aligned to what I used to do, and I knew I had the skill set, and you two would see me veer off into that, and you were both very sweet and supportive and helped me along those ways. I know in my life, this has been true since college, that if it is really difficult and I have to fight tooth and nail for whatever it is seriously not meant to be. And the thing that's so smooth and easy and comes quickly is where I'm supposed to be. So, you know, I have lots of examples about it, but this is, you know, as a side note, I'm a big follower of the theory of flow. I don't know if you two have heard of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He has a book on, I think it's called Good Business, and he's been talking as a TED Talk on flow. Flow speaks to where, you know, you have, you're in flow when you are so engaged in what you're doing, and you've married your passion with also you have some level of training, that it just, everything is like hyper speed and your day is over like that. And you don't have enough time in the day to do everything. That is what I am in it now that I'm 100% animal law. But before I did that choice to pick a lane, as I think what one person said, or another way of how my fear manifested was, you know, I wanted the safety. I do know that in a different sense to Meg, I am afraid of having regrets. So if you say to Cheryl, what would you do if years later you found out X? How would you feel about it knowing that you chose Y instead? And, you know, another woman I respect from our group had said, what would you do, Cheryl? You don't know if X, animal law success, is just around the corner. And if you take job Y, you'll never know. Remember that day? That was probably Maine.
I remember that.
Right? It made a huge difference for me, because then
That's her fruit basket.
I know, I was like, oh, hell no, I can't do that. I can't have that regret. I just cannot. I couldn't get past that. So I said to the group, and, you know, to that statement, and the statement was, you've got to stick in the lane and you've got to keep toughing it out, because you don't know, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week. And that conversation, I think, was about 14, 15 months ago. And, you know, I've been tracking this pretty hardcore, trying to see at what level is it smooth. And, you know, it started hitting. I started hitting in terms of regular volume, regular attention, regular calls, about October, November. So not that long ago, but not that long after we had that conversation. And so again, to those out there who might be afraid, and, you know, if you're still afraid after hearing everything that Meg said, which is true 100%, but if you're a I can't regret person, then I say to you, you do not know if it's a week or 2 weeks, 4 months. It will be less than a year for sure. And I cannot believe how much I've, like, again, going through my journals, it shocks me where I was 2 years ago to this month, and where I was a year ago to this month, and where I was last November. I mean, this is what, May? It hasn't even been full half of a year, maybe. Yeah, it's been a half of a year almost. So,
and we're in a pandemic. Hello.
Yeah, right. And we're in a pandemic. So it's, I'm in flow right now. Like, I love Mihaly. I wish I could meet him. I worship this man, and I am in flow now. And it's super exciting. And I want everyone out there, all of you guys, have a flow for you. And I'm seriously, I'm being legitimately real about this. Meg is in her flow right now, and I love it. And Holly's in her flow. And it's super exciting to be amongst that and work off of that and build on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I was listening to you talk, I think one of the things that came up for me is like just this concept of identity, right? So for a lot of you who are on this know me, I started my career as a journalist, a job that I loved. And then I took this left turn to be a lawyer, and everybody in San Diego like knew me as a lawyer. And when I decided to go back to my true love, which is storytelling, this thing that I've like done my whole life, people like did not get it. And this is actually a question that we're getting. So I'm going to tie it in here, and I want you guys to answer it as well. The question is, did you have close people who did not understand your reinvention, and how did you get through that? Did you have to create major boundaries or cut ties in order to reinvent? And I didn't have to cut any ties, but I definitely had like my mom, I grew up with not a lot. And my mom and my family, you know, they're always going to be supportive. So mom, if you're watching, like, I'm not saying that you were not supportive, but, you know, people say, like, you know, you went to law school and you're making good money. And if you just hang in a little bit longer, like, you'll get elevated. And the thing was, and my lawyer colleagues were saying this to me as well. Like, I had just, when I made the decision to go into PR, I had just received Lawyers Club Outstanding New Lawyer, the Hugh Friedman Award, which is a big deal. And Sandra Day O'Connor was there at, like, the dinner. It was so awesome. It was so cool. And I felt like a huge imposter, by the way, which is like, we should do one of these about imposter syndrome, because I don't know a single successful person that hasn't suffered from that at some point. But I remember standing up there thinking, oh, I'm accepting this award, and I'm about to, like, stop being a lawyer, and I feel like such a fraud. People just didn't understand it. They were like, why would you give up? Give up was a phrase I heard a lot. All that you had been working for. And, you know, I would be lying to the person who's answering the question. I'd be lying if I said that didn't bother me. I mean, it definitely kept me, I think, in that job longer than it needed to in hindsight. Hindsight is 2020. What I know now is that all of that experience, I wasn't giving any of it up. I wasn't, all of that experience sort of has informed how I approach what I do now. The other thing I'll say that jogged whenever Cheryl was talking is that when I started doing PR in particular, I was like, this feels really easy. And if things don't feel hard, I must not be good at them, which makes no sense. But hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, practicing law just always felt like this mental, like, I was always so exhausted, and I felt like I could never prepare enough because I had this need to perform and to please and to, you know, and that is why I was at a plaintiff's firm and then a defense firm, and then I was in-house. Like, I tried everything to make this thing fit, and this puzzle did not fit for me because it did not feel true to who I was. And so what I've realized is, like, PR feels easy to me, not because it is an easy thing, but because it is something that I am good at, that I can do, and then that I have mastered. And so, like, but that has been a years-long process, you know. I mean, I think it's easy to go to things like this and see people who are in a certain place, and we're here at the beginning of the, you know, the chronology of our reinvention, and you're here, and it's like, that feels like that delta is so wide, but it's all part of the process. So I would like for you guys to respond in your own way to this question from one of our attendees about, you know, how do you deal with did you have close people that didn't get it, and how did you deal with that?
I'll start. I think I read something. There's a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and I think it's a great tool, even if you're not pursuing a creative path. The book is geared more toward creatives, but I used it and went through it for writing, and I found it very helpful. But one of the things that Julia Cameron talks about, and you'll see this in a lot of books, I think Cheryl kind of touched on it too, there's a spiritual side to things. You call it energy, spiritual, God, whatever you want to call it. There is that aspect of it. But Julia Cameron also talks about kind of healing your inner child and letting that inner child come out to play. But in response to this question, she talks about when you start if you're thinking reinvention, you do want to protect your dream a little bit. So at some point, you're going to be putting your energy out into the world, and you're not going to give a crap that someone's like, why are you going to do your own? Why are you going to coach? Why are you going to open a dog law? That's crazy. You're ready for that at that point. But when you start, I do think it's important to think about the people in your life, whether it's professional and personal, that will nurture your dream and will hold you up for possibility. So I think that's important early on, so that you can build up your ability to withstand when others do throw out those questions, or the don't get your hopes up, or who are you helping? Dogs don't need lawyers, that kind of thing. And I get the same thing because I do special education law, and I definitely have had from other attorneys like, you must not be very busy. And I'm like, you must not know anything about special education. So I answer it usually slightly more respectfully than that, but that's what I'm thinking. So I do think be cautious and really think about who are the people who will support me no matter what, and reach out to those people early on to get that support. And then, you know, it's going to be different for everyone. When I left my firm, I mean, I anticipated that some of the partners we would sever our professional relationship. And I talked with my executive group about, I was really worried. I had a woman that I worked with that I considered a close friend, and I didn't know how I was fairly confident she was not going to react well. And it was so funny because in having those conversations, it's like, but they're your friends. So it doesn't matter. Your friends are going to celebrate you like, oh my God, you're taking this journey. I'm so excited for you. Or like, I'm so mad that you're leaving, but I'm so excited for you. Well, to answer the question that was raised, that is not what occurred. And that tie was severed. We had an awkward Facebook thing that occurred as well, that I'm not going to go into detail about here. Shouldn't have been awkward, but it was on the other person's end. And
Facebook is just awkward. We can
right,
all, that's something we can all agree on.
Yes.
And so that tie, I mean, it's funny because I do actually work with that person. Sometimes our paths cross professionally, but I did lose that friendship, and I did lose that resource of joy and support in my life. That was an outlier, and I am sad about it still. Sometimes I contemplate, maybe I'll call her, and I let go of that. I do work on letting go of that. So I did have one tie that ended up being completely severed, and that person was very injured by the fact that I had made this decision. And I think if you're afraid about that, or you're wondering, that's why I said I encourage you to really think about, okay, who are the people that are in my inner circle that I can share this with? And sometimes if you're changing jobs, that circle is limited, because if you're a lawyer changing jobs, you're not allowed to talk to other people in your firm about it. There are very strict rules that apply. And that's why I also think working with coaches and professional groups can also help support that. But yeah, I did have that experience, and I'm sad about it. That's the way it went. And I'm okay with it though.
Yeah. How about
Cheryl,
you,
how
Cheryl?
about you?
Well, I love that we're talking together about this, because in so many respects we're having contrasting experiences. And here again is another example. So, my mother, growing up with my mother, there was nothing she couldn't do and nothing she didn't do. And she started dog training because she did not like the class that she took her Irish setter through, which was trained by the man who I realized recently he's no longer alive. Fawn John was his name. Fawn Johnson had Fawn John Kennels. Anyways, he was the man that used to train the San Diego Police Department dogs, security dogs, attack dogs, whatever. And he brought those same methods into my mom's dog training class. And my mother would come home crying because she felt like she was putting her dog through so much and it was not fun. And she wanted to do a different thing. She wanted to do it her way, and had talked to people in her world that she respected and said, I want to be a dog trainer, but I want to make it fun for my students. We should have fun with our dogs, and every dog has a different personality, and we should work with that. And they told her, you can't do it. You don't have the education and you don't have the experience. Well, so knowing my mother, if you don't know my mother, you know that that's ridiculous that you would have said that to her. And so she just went out and she has so many books on dog training, it's crazy. But when you grow up with a mother like that, you don't have any ability to say, I can't do it. And so for me, my mother was always like, yes, you can do it. And for her also, I don't think I fully mentioned it before, but she always wanted me to be a dog trainer. She didn't like me doing sports in high school. She didn't understand why that was important, because you can't earn a living at it, she'd say. You should do something where you can earn a living and have a career, like dog training. And yes, I know how to train dogs, but that's not, I can do it, but it's not thrilling, right? You see my face is already going, wah, wah. Anyways, I didn't have, when I came to the decision to move into animal law, I had already lost a lot of ties. Ties had been severed in the form of support that I thought I had, professional mentoring that I thought I had from my previous legal life. And so I didn't have that. I was kind of starting with fresh slate. My executive group was my support group. My mother was a huge support for me. And my best friends, people who know me, when I told them that I wanted to do this thing, like, if you know me, it's not shocking. It makes perfect sense. And so that's why I say it's a good contrast to make, because I didn't have that. The only people that were the naysayers were, like I said, these, more senior attorneys that had their own practices doing, I don't know what they did, but they did a lot of golfing too. And, you know, I was always afraid about, you know, going into litigation, that, you know, I'm afraid to litigate. I don't know why, I just get afraid sometimes. But again, I never had the experience where someone in my group or circle said, you can't do that, or don't try so hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead. No, you totally did. And I think this was actually, I'm glad that this question was posed by one of the attendees, because it was actually a question that I had jotted down that I wanted to ask you guys as well. I mean, I think a lot of this, you know, sometimes when you have folks that are, I don't want to say not supportive, because can't really think of anybody in my life that was not supportive when I wanted to make, you know, thankfully, when I wanted to make a change. But, you know, the role of that we play when we're good friends and we love people is to help them vet all the possibilities. And sometimes, like, not all feedback is going to be created equal, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it, you know, for folks that said to me, why would you make that change now? It was kind of like, you've worked really hard at this thing. Why make a left turn? You know, like, why this, like, yes, I can see why you would want to do this, because you'll be good at it and you'll be good at whatever you do, like, same kind of thing. But also what was all of this for, you know? And I think for me, I just had to be very, very clear with myself that, like, this is something that I'm doing. I've made the decision and I don't need the permission from anyone. And I'm going to just devote myself 100% to it. You know, I think fear of the unknown can just definitely be something that holds people back. And I also, this is not a question that has been asked yet, but I'm sure someone out there is thinking that, you know, I'm sure there are folks that think, like, I want to reinvent myself because this ain't working, but I don't know what I want to reinvent myself into. Like, how do I get there? You know, so I would love to hear from both of you about, you know, your general thoughts on that. I mean, I think that's that interior work that feels, Meg, to your point, like really heavy. And you're like, I mean, I could think about that, or I could just go lay in the sun and have a glass of champs and just, you know, read a book, right? I mean, like, I have had that thought myself when I've confronted these big issues personally. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, what if you don't know what you want to reinvent yourself into, but you just know you want to reinvent?
Sure. I think my perspective on that is, if you don't know, it is really helpful to think about where your, you know, joy exists. Where do you derive your joy from, and where, you know, I don't want to say strengths, because it's so cliche and it's lost meaning, but really, like, okay, for me, it's the dog world, right? I know what the experience is to own a dog. I know what animal hoarding looks like and why people hoard animals. Like, nobody can take that away from me. Nobody can take animal world away from me. And I think if you can reflect on what is that thing within you that nobody else can take from you. Nobody can debate whether you are knowledgeable in sports law, or you're very knowledgeable in kinesiology, or whatever it is that I'm trying to think of examples that are not legal and not dog law.
I like it.
You know, like, for
kinesiology is specific.
Yeah, like, I don't want to be a lawyer, and where does my joy reside? Kinesiology, I would rather go into that. Like, or what's another example? Movie making, filmmaking. You know, if that's something where you're deeply embedded and you know it inside and out, and you are constantly reading articles and constantly talking to people and carrying around a magazine since 1990 or 88, I don't even remember the year, but
like somebody.
Not even published anymore. You can't find it online. What is that thing that right, it's kind of crazy. And I've moved a lot, so it speaks volumes. But
share with you in every box.
Pretty much. You know, or is it are you a master at cooking up new recipes, and you love watching all the Instagram stories of these new recipes being cooked, but you think that's not a legitimate profession? What is the thing that nobody can take from you? One. And two, another practical step is communicate, talk through with, get a circle together, whether it's an executive support group, which I still participate in and believe in wholeheartedly, but you've got to communicate it so you can have people relaying back to you what they see. If I didn't have that, I'm certain I would have been still looking at the shiny baubles off to the left and, ooh, this thing, it looks better to me.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what you're referring to there, Cheryl, is I don't know if I'm froze. Oh, there we go. I think I froze for a second. Sorry. You know, you've got to be willing to be vulnerable with people, and vulnerability is like having a moment. Everybody's talking about it. Brene Brown is like literally wrote the book on it, so recommend that, reading all of her stuff and following her. But you know, you have to be willing to like be yourself, be your unvarnished self with people that you trust, that you're, you know, soliciting feedback from, and actually be ready to hear what they have to say in response, right?
Yep.
Meg, how about you? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, you know, and I think if you are sitting and you're not sure, you're thinking, I can't even pronounce the kinesiologist word, so I'm not going to go there. But if you're
Pick another.
if you're
Arts, DIY arts.
if you're feeling in a place where you don't feel good or you're feeling stuck, I think it might be that you already have a passion that you can, I do think there's some underlying thing that you can reveal. I don't necessarily think you have to be an expert in it, but it might be that you just need to uncover what that passion is. You know, one of the things that I love about Cheryl's story is that she had this thing that she even knew, like she knew about, but wasn't like, there wasn't synergy with her until later. And so I think if you're feeling stuck or feeling like you want to change and you don't know how to do it, I also really encourage getting within a group. Maybe there's a mental health aspect to that with therapy. Maybe there's a coaching aspect to it. I think if it's professional change, again, like Cheryl, I really encourage that. I also think you need to be vulnerable, not just with others, but with yourself. And so books like The Artist's Way, definitely. I have another book that I'm reading right now called Steering by Starlight. It's written by Martha Beck. It's kind of a what color is my parachute type thing. But what both of those books do is you're getting into your own nitty gritty and you're thinking about, when I was a kid, what did I want to be? I wanted to be a fireman. I wanted to be a superstar. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a waitress. I wanted to be a mom or a dad. What is it that you wanted to be? And what feelings does that bring up for you? Because maybe you don't really want to go to medical school right now, or maybe you do. But there might be something of, and Holly, I think Holly and Cheryl both spoke to this about helping other people. Maybe that help is what you're passionate about. And there's lots of different ways to explore that. So I would say if you're not sure, start your own investigation and don't feel limited to what you're supposed to do. Like, oh, well, I could go to law school. I could go back to school. I could do this. If what Cheryl said about filmmaking, if you're like, I've kind of always wanted to make movies, then dive in and research and soak it up and learn about it, make it. And as soon as you start talking to people, I fully believe in that idea. And I think, I haven't seen the flow, but I suspect it's similar to The Secret or to Brene Brown's talks or any of the books you read. Once you start to put your energy out there, it will come back to you. And suddenly you didn't even know that your cousin's husband was a producer. You didn't know that your neighbor down the street had a sound studio in their house. And those things start to come up and there's a synergy that happens and it's beautiful, and I fully believe in it. So start investigating and be wild and crazy about it. And I do believe that whatever your reinvention story will be, it's starting today. And 10 years from now, when you're like, this is what you'll be saying, you know, I was destined to be here running this film studio. And I know that because in 2020, during the pandemic, I attended this Zoom about reinvention, and that started me on a path that I never looked back on. I fully believe that. So dig in.
I know we're short on time, but I just want to
And
squeeze.
I know all of the 3 checks.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to squeeze this one thing in because I don't think we've touched on it, but for me, it's been really important. And I think Holly would agree on her side, and Meg too, is the story part. So, you know, I just started recently focusing in on storytelling and story imprinting. I've done a few of the webinars with story imprinting and sessions, and I've started integrating it into my own business development and how I talk about myself. And I've actually started using it now with my clients. And it has
Good.
made such a huge difference. I mean, one client, I was struggling so hard to tell her story. And it just is all flowing now. I'm back in flow with her. And so, that's another, I would encourage everybody to access that and bring storytelling into your world. And kind of what Meg was just talking about, I didn't pay a lot of attention to stories, and now I see it everywhere, and my brain is lit up. So I have so many stories about my background. My clients' stories come alive, and I am a far better advocate as a result.
Yeah. Well, both of you kind of got into, we have one more question, and that's probably all we're going to have time for, just to keep us at the hour. But this is a great question to the person who posed the question, because it ties nicely into the last question I had. And she says, some of us are being forced to reinvent ourselves by the pandemic, either because of job loss or being forced to do your same job in a new way, remote work, which is my situation. How can we make the most of this? I resisted the remote work, but now I'm finding it has a lot of benefits. I would like for you each to kind of touch on that specific question, and also address, if you don't mind, what would you say to people who feel like reinvention is impossible at a time like this?
I would say there is never any certainty in life. So I don't want to diminish the very, to use Holly's word, unprecedented time that we are living in right now. I don't want to diminish.
I'm so sick of the word unprecedented, by the way.
Exactly.
And I use it all the time.
Right. Yeah. Like it is so we are a very unique situation right now, certainly across the world. So I don't want to diminish that, but I do want you to really think about, there's never a time when you're making a change that you're certain. I mean, you might feel certain that the change is right, but there's no certainty that it will be successful or that you will achieve what you're setting out to achieve. And so, I think I loved the way the question was asked, because I think there was an answer within that question, which was, I initially resisted the remote work, and then I'm coming to see benefits in it. And I would say, in this time of the pandemic, when you're feeling resistance, that might be exactly where you need to dive in. And I would give yourself some compassion during this time. I have heard a lot of my clients say, I'm wasting time, I'm wasting opportunity. And I don't think that's probably not true. There's a lot of crap going on right now that's causing exhaustion and fear and emotional stress, and educating kids, or being alone, or being with people, all create their own problems. So I would say that you could use this time now. It might be that you do have job loss, right? And that's a very big part of what's happening for people. And so you may need to be focusing on how are you going to make money and looking for a job. And that might be upfront for you. But while you're doing that, I think you can simultaneously be thinking about, okay, I need to get money in the door right now to pay my rent. And what if I could be the movie producer, the actress, the lawyer, open my own firm? What if I do launch a solo firm right now, or I do launch a solo, whatever it is that I'm doing, or I go out on my own? I think that you can use this time now, even if you have to hustle and take a job and get money and pay your rent. I get that, but be able to use that to think about what really sparks my energy. And I love that idea of resistance, and exploring that to figure out, there might be something within what you're resisting that's going to benefit you, like the resistance of working from home, to suddenly like, oh, I actually love this because I do go running every day at noontime now, or I take a nap, whatever it is. So that's my thought. And we're never certain. So don't kind of let your mind tell you, well, I can't make a change now because of the pandemic. I think that's a story you're telling yourself, and I would challenge that story.
Yes.
Cheryl,
and I will say too, I have a tendency to be very optimistic, and I like to be positive about everything. And so I think it's easy to sound like, everything was going great and I just decided to switch over to animal law. But quite frankly, if you don't know me, you should know that up before the pandemic, I had my own personal pandemics. I had multiple pandemics of my own in my own life. That were equally as could be crisis derived emotion. I felt like the floor was being pulled out from under me multiple times over the last 5 years. And so I guess what I think is that I agree with what Meg says, is that yes, you do have to focus on stability. You need to build a foundation to pay your bills. And yet that's okay. It doesn't keep you from investigating, talking to other people, finding your champions, you know, talking to people who are doing what you'd like to do and ask them, what do you think? Should I do it? You know, I drove out 2 hours out of town with my mother to meet an animal law attorney who had been doing it for 10 years. And I asked her those very questions. And we left that with her saying, yes, you should do it. Don't listen to anyone else. And I'm here to help you. I will help you along the way. And that drive home with my mother for another 2 hours, we talked about it. And so, yeah, that was during a time when I was looking at a lot of options and I was trying to find stability. So you can, I think you can do both, but at a certain point, you're going to have to pick a lane. So hopefully pick the lane that you won't regret.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in the last like 30 seconds we've got, before I close this out, I would like for you guys to tell everybody how they can find you. And Megan, we have a question of, is there a specific organization that helps with professional coaching? And I assume the person is asking like finding a coach, but feel free to chat me up if I'm incorrect about that. So I will let you deal with that as well. So Megan, Cheryl, tell us how we can find you, how we can stay in touch with you and know about you.
I can be found at nolananimallaw.com. My last name, Nolan, animallaw.com. And my social media is on there. And you can also find my dog's Instagram at Nemo the Tripod. It's tripod is TRIPAWD. And that is another thing I'm trying to transition. I want to reinvent Nemo's page to be a social media page for my animal law practice.
I love it.
So those are the main places you can find me.
Awesome.
Great. And you can find me also on my legal website, meganmoorelaw.com, and it's MEGANMOORE law.com. My email address is megan@meganmoorelaw.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. My law office is on Facebook. So lots of different ways that you can connect with me. I would encourage and I can also, Holly, will we shoot an email out maybe with our contact information, or how could we do that?
Yeah, I can do that because this person's anonymous, but they can, yeah.
And so I would encourage the person asking, there are lots of different ways you can get coaching. And there's groups and organizations. I encourage you to just shoot me an email and we can talk about it, and I can talk to you about the kind of coaching I do. And then you can make a decision about where you might explore it. And then there's lots of options. I'll also give a shout out to Story Imprinting right now. They're doing a lot of webinars and trainings on storytelling and how to kind of enhance your own personal brand. So I want to make sure I give a shout out to that. And anyone who has questions about coaching, please feel free to contact me. I would love to tell you more about it.
Awesome. Y'all, this was so good. Thank you for spending the time. Thank you to everyone who attended. This was great. We, again, as I said, we're doing these every Friday. Please follow Story Imprinting on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I will put this up on the YouTube channel so you can share it with folks who weren't able to attend, or you can watch again if you want. And on our LinkedIn, we post the webinars and stuff that we're doing. We really want to be a valuable content partner to all of you as we sort of navigate this really strange and unprecedented time. Last time I'm going to say unprecedented, I promise, when we're into the pandemic. But if you have any feedback, any questions, please get in touch with me. As I said, I will be sending an email out so y'all will get the link and contact info for our panelists. But have a beautiful weekend. Go out there and do something fun with your face covering on and be socially distant. See y'all next time. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Cheryl.
Bye, Meg.